First up are three Hampden-Sydney men, two from Jim's early years, Bill Flowers, class of '71, and Jimmy Lewis, class of '77, and one from his later years, John Axsom, class of '05, right, John? Who knew him as a teacher, a coach, a mentor, and a friend. They will be followed by a friend and former colleague, Ralph Haddix, who spent more than 3 decades in the history department's trenches with Jim. Bill, the mic is yours.
Wow. Good morning. We called it Coach. Not Mr. Sims, not Coach Sims, but Coach. It was a term of endearment. He was our leader. Jim and I arrived on campus the same year. He to teach history and humanities, me to get a college degree and to play soccer. I had just graduated from Episcopal High School in Alexandria, Virginia, where I played soccer and had been elected to the first team All-Metro soccer 2 years in a row. So I think I was a pretty good player. And my grandmother wanted me to come to Hampden-Sydney. And she taught me all my whole life, I want you to go to Hampden-Sydney. I think she wanted me to be a Presbyterian minister, which didn't happen. But and I knew friends who had gone to Hampden-Sydney. And I went to the library at Episcopal High School, and I'm flipping through the literature that the school sends out, and there's some kids playing soccer, so I said, that's where I'm going. I'll please my grandmother, I'll be able to play soccer. In the summer before I never came to school to visit for a visit to the college. I just knew that's where I wanted to go. So I kept waiting in the summertime for the soccer coach to get in touch with me about playing on the team. And I get this little postcard in the mail from Stokely Fulton, who was the football coach, wanted to know what my helmet size was. And I flipped that card over and I wrote on the back of it, I'm coming to Hampden-Sydney to play soccer. So I arrived on campus with my suitcase and my soccer ball. And the second day I was here, I went down to this gymnasium downstairs looking for the soccer coach, only to find out there wasn't one. There wasn't no varsity sport. I felt hoodwinked. I rushed Sigma Nu fraternity, where there were a bunch of soccer players, and I played intramurals for them my freshman year, but that wasn't enough. We formed a club team the next year, and we played University of Richmond, BCU, and other colleges nearby, but that wasn't enough. So I went to see Coach Burrell, who was the athletic director, and I said to him, what do we need to do to become an NCAA recognized sport? And he said, well, first you need a team, second you need a coach, third we need board approval, and then we can apply to NCAA for sanction. So I had some work to do. But the biggest one I had to do was to find a coach. As I was taking humanities, Coach Sims was one of my professors, so I knew him early on. I knew he had been an outstanding goalie at the University of Maryland, so he was my man. He was the one that I was going to talk to. And I approached him, and one of the questions he said was, well, what's the pay? And I said, well, it's not very good. And he said, well, what's not very good? And I said, well, I think it's zero. But he agreed because he, like me, loved the sport of soccer. So I had some work to do. I had to get a team. There was one thing to have 13 or 14 students go to college and play in a club game, but to have practice and get ready for games, we needed 25 or 30 people. So I canvassed the dorms and got people to come out to try it for soccer, people who hadn't even played soccer before, like Bob Harris, who came to Hampden-Sydney to play basketball, ended up going there for soccer thinking he was going to be a goalie, but ended up being one of the finest center backs that ever played the game. And we built a team from there. We had to play, the first year we were 2-3-3 was our record. And the next year was a full season. We had 13 games. The first 7 games, we were 1-6. And I think we were outscored. We scored 2 goals, and I think the other team scored about 17 goals. And coach switched us around a little bit. And over the last 6 games, we were 4-1-1 and only gave up 3 goals in 6 games. So one of the games we had to play was against Lynchburg. And Lynchburg was ranked number 3 in the country. We had played teams like UVA, Batterson, George Mason, Old Dominion, some what are now Division I schools. As we learned, there was no Division III, Division II, Division I. It was just an open season. And Lynchburg was ranked 3rd in the country, and they had 2 midfielders. One of them was called Noodles, that were both All-American. And they had an outstanding game. And before the game, we didn't have a locker room. We had a nail on the wall in the weight room. We didn't have vans to go to the games. We drove ourselves. So this particular game was up in Lynchburg, and we had to drive ourselves. And we would meet up at the soccer field, and Coach's parting words to us were, "Don't embarrass me, just get there." So we arrived on campus, and the field was in between 2 dormitories, and on the inside of the dormitories were all these students who were hanging out the windows taunting us as soon as we got on campus. And we knew we couldn't play Lynchburg on a full field, but Coach had a plan. And he said, we're gonna play bunker ball. We're gonna play the game in our end of the field, make them try to score on us as opposed to us trying to score on them. And hopefully we can get a counterattack and score a goal. The goal was to keep it close, keep it respectable. And as you can imagine, we played 90 minutes, almost 90 minutes in our own field. We had a goalie, Rick Anke, who had been trained by Coach, who was an outstanding keeper. And when the game started and we were playing in the game, they would take shots on goal, and the ball would hit the crossbars. It sounded like a cannon going off, and they'd sit the side post, and it sounded like a cannon going off. And Rick Anke was making save after save. It was in one save, he gathered up the ball, did an outlet pass. One-touched it over their defense to Eric Kohler, who was standing up at midfield. Their keeper had come way up the field because he was watching all the action, waiting for them to score or watch them score goals. Eric Kohler ran onto the ball, kicked the ball off his shin. The ball rolled down his shin onto his foot, and he launched this high arcing shot over the keeper's head. The ball bounced and rolled into the goal. The ball did not even hit the back of the net. We had scored on Lynchburg. When the game was over, the score was Hampden-Sydney 1, Lynchburg 0. In 2015, I was inducted into the Hampden-Sydney Hall of Fame, in large part because of Coach's efforts, and also because of my fraternity brothers, Hal Huey and George Hamner. And I said 2 things at the end of my speech. I said, 1, I think Hampden-Sydney is a better school because it now offers soccer as a recognized sport. The second thing I said was, I know Hampden-Sydney is a better school because of the presence of Coach Sims on campus, in the classroom, and on the soccer field. And Coach, I know you're listening, so I want to thank you for all the memories. And 2, if there's soccer after life here on earth, I want to be on your team. Thank you.
morning. Thanks, Bill. Hard to follow that. First, I'd like to say, Edie, thank you for asking me to come and say a few words with our coach. It's a real honor. I'm fortunate to have been not only one of his players on the field, but one of his students in the classroom. Interesting to see the perspective, from that perspective, the two different people that I ran up against. One completely different, and then at the same time, very much the same. My first meeting with Coach was an interesting one. Freshman year, I'm inventable in the way bottom. Second or third day at school, a little intimidated. I'd been to a high school where I graduated with a class of 13, so I was quite a bit intimidated being here. There was a knock at the door. My roommate and I were sitting there and opened the door, and there's this relatively imposing figure who was about 6'3" or 4 or 5 or 6 from where I was sitting. He was like 8 feet tall. And he said, "Are you Jimmy Lewis?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, I'm Jim Sims. I'm the soccer coach. And I hear that you are a goalie in soccer. We need a goalie. Can you be at practice at 4 o'clock?" I thought for a minute. I played soccer in high school. I was a midfielder or a forward. I played 2 games for fun my senior year in the goal. And I played 1 winter of indoor soccer, and I played goalie for that. But I wasn't a goalie. How he found out that I had played goal, I still to this day never found out. But either being too naive or too scared or both. I said, "Yeah, I guess I played goalie a little bit, and I think I can come to practice." And he said, "Good, see you at 4, turned around and left. My roommate, sitting over in the corner, heard the whole thing and looked over at me and said, "Lewis, what in the hell have you just done?" And I said, "I don't know, but I guess we're about to find out." And that was the beginning of 4 great years and a wonderful experience, both in the classroom and on the field. I took Western Civ and Russian history from you, and all my fraternity brothers said, "Why are you taking Russian history? You're a biology major." And then they went, "Oh wait, he's your soccer coach. He's gonna get good grades, don't you think?" And they went, "He doesn't do that." And as I found out, he didn't. I studied harder for his Russian classes than any other that I had here, and finally my last semester I made a B. Thanks, it took a while. On the soccer field, Coach could be a little bit intimidating if you were around at all. He never held back his feelings. He was fully engaged, but at the same time, you knew that he was trying to help you be the best you could and the team to do the best they could. Now, that's not to say he wasn't hard, and that sometimes he was pretty downright hard. Sometimes he would make you feel as low as possible. As an example, we had a Saturday game of all things my freshman year against Roanoke College, and the game was at 11 o'clock. Well, I just rolled in at 9:30 from Barry, Washington on a fraternity road trip that morning. And needless to say, he was a little bit unhappy when I was late to warm-ups. And to add insult to injury, we tied Roanoke 2-2, but I let both goals go through my legs. You know, there's those times when you know things are not good, and this was one of those. He pulled me out of the game before it was over, and I walked over towards the bench, and I walked past him, and I'll never forget it. He looked at me in disgust, turned away, and never said a word. But I knew what I had done, and I vowed never to do that again. It's like when you had with your parents, or someone that you really, really respect. You know when you've disappointed them, and it cuts to your core. This was one of those times that I had with Coach. He didn't have to say one thing at all. The message was clear. It was, to me, a true teachable moment outside of the classroom. You could always hear Coach on the sidelines. He was not quiet. He was yelling encouragement. He was angry at the referees. all the emotions and frustration of being a coach that couldn't impact the game, unlike how he was when he was at Maryland. And as Bill mentioned, he was quite a player in Maryland. Their teams, when he was there, won the ACC championship 3 years in a row, and I think they were undefeated. When I would muff a drop kick or make a bad throw on an outlet pass, the one thing I would remember hearing from the sidelines is, in a booming voice, "Jimmy, just punt the damn ball." And all the players on the other team and the fans behind me would start laughing, going, "What in the world is going on there?" But that's how he got his message across. By the way, and I asked Edie about this, I'd never heard in 4 years, I never heard Coach cuss once. He said, "Damn," but I never heard him cuss one time. I don't know if anybody else did, but I've not talked to anybody. I even asked Edie about that. She said, "No, he never did, but he gave me that look, and that look made all the difference in the world. He didn't have to say it then." Some of my fondest memories with Coach were at practice. I broke practice down into 3 categories with him, each depending on how he was dressed. If you see him coming up the little hill towards the soccer field in his classroom attire, you knew it wasn't going to be a very fun practice. We'd probably played poorly, I lost the game before, and it wasn't much fun. Then you see him with a little bit of lighter step a couple of days later, and he'd come trudging in his Chuck Taylor low-cut basketball shoes, size 15s, and would come join us in practice. But the best was when he came running up the field with his soccer cleats on, ran onto the field to play in the field or even play the goal. You could tell it made all the difference in the world for him to enjoy it as much as we enjoyed having him there. We had 3 losing seasons my freshman, sophomore, and junior year. My freshman year, we didn't win a game. We were 0-9-5. We finally, in '76, had a winning year, so went 7-5-2. But as Bill said, there are certain things that really made it happy, and it didn't matter the record. The win at Lynchburg. For us, our junior year, we beat William and Mary at William and Mary when they were ranked against a coach who I knew very well. And every time Coach and I got together, we always rehashed that win. He really loved winning the games against those teams. He was gracious in defeat, although he hated it. He was humble in victory. He was as genuine as the day is long. I miss his intensity and his honesty, his enthusiasm and his candor. His friendship, and like most of you, I have the fondest memories of our experiences together, and I'm thankful for all the positive influence he imparted on me for the rest of my life. I truly think he exemplified the college's mission of forming good men and good citizens.
Before I get started, David, Professor Marion, told me that I would only be held to 5 minutes.
It's such a funny thing coming from him if you ever had a class with him, because I had him for several and I never made it to the class after on time. So with all due respect, Professor Marion, I've got the 4.
Before I get started, I do want to thank Edie and Kay and the rest of the family for letting me be up here and speak with you all today. Unlike the 2 distinguished gentlemen that precede me, and I want to say I'm truly humbled to even be allowed to speak. I did not have Jim Sims as a professor. I did not have Jim Sims as a coach on the soccer field. I had him because he was the essence of what Hampden-Sydney was when I applied and what it should always be. from 1775 until the day, the last day of the world. And it's because of the man that he was. And I want to focus on that today. I want to keep it lively and exciting and funny, and I've got some funny stories that I'd love to share with you. It's just so weird for me to be up here talking about him. I know there's going to be more. I know Professor Haddix is going to speak later, but I want to start off because our country recently had a tragedy. We lost President Jimmy Carter, and he passed away. And I watched the funeral, as I do on all presidents. I find it interesting, and I feel like it's a part of our United States culture, and it's something that we should do no matter if you're Republican or Democrat. And I was watching that, and I was very moved by Steve Ford's eulogy of Gerald Ford's son. And the reason I was so moved by it is because he talked about the relationship that Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford shared after the election in 1976, and what great friends they became, but how tough and rough that election was and how it was hard on them. And as soon as he started talking, I could see, and I saw the pictures up here, I could see Ron Heineman and I could see Jim Sims. And that's exactly what it was like. And that's one of the funny stories right there. I told you I never took Professor, or I called him Coach too, and I'll tell that story in a moment. But I never took him for class. And but I knew him while I was a student because I was in the Young Republicans Club, and I was always around the Wilson Center and General Sam, and he would pick on me, and he didn't know me, and he didn't have to. I loved the fact that he did it. But he one time, I think it was my junior year, I was taking Professor Heineman for 20th century U.S. history. And Coach goes, "Damn, John, you keep ducking me." And I go, "Well, you've been trying to convert him for 30 years and didn't succeed. I'm going to go in there and try to do it in one semester." It didn't work, and I'm glad it didn't work. The relationship that those two men had on this campus should be the poster child for what academic discernment and disagreement is all about in order to actually educate young men for lives of character and consequence. And they both did it well, and I can't help but believe that those two men, along with Amos Lee Lane and John Brinkley and General Sam and the rest, are up there together today looking down on us and smiling. The way I got to know Coach Sims and start calling him Coach is I always said Professor Sims, Professor Sims. And he would go, and especially in the latter years, he'd say, "John, just call me Jim." And I'm sorry, I can't. Number one, my grandfather raised me differently. I'm not going to call somebody that's senior to me by his first name. It's presumptuous, and it's rude by Southern values. And so finally he said, "Well, I know I've never coached you, so call me Coach." And the actual truth of it is, he coached me every day I ever met him in my life. And he didn't have to coach me on how to kick a soccer ball to do it. He coached me how to be a true Hampden-Sydney man and a man in general. And for that, he'll never be repaid. To Edie and the family, I want to say on behalf of our college, every alumnus, every professor that's worked with him, and every staff member that's walked through these gates, thank you for sharing him with us, because he definitely did devote his life and time to Hampden-Sydney College. He was a double-dog Marine, and he did all the other things he did academically, but Hampden-Sydney was his lifeblood. And for the college, I want to say thank you so much for letting us have him. One of my favorite stories about Coach Sims that goes back to, and some of you know Ray Bottom. He was an alumnus class of 1951. Ray called everybody that was 6 months younger than him young man. And one day, Professor Sims, or Coach, came up to me. He goes, "John, that man's brilliant." And I go, "He is?" He goes, "Well, yeah, he's a pretty smart guy. He's been real successful in business. He's a Hampden-Sydney guy." He goes, "Nope, he's brilliant because he called me young man." And I think Coach was in his mid-70s, late 70s at that point. So it meant a lot to him that another person would say that. I loved his wit, and I can echo the sentiments of the players that you didn't really have to think, and he didn't need those expletives or extra adjectives to get his point across, whether it was in class or to a group of people sitting on the front lawn of the Wilson Center, which he loved. A lot of people talk about their Mount Rushmore of basketball, their Mount Rushmore of soccer, their Mount Rushmore of whatever. And then I want to think of that for a minute, the Mount Rushmore of Hampden-Sydney. First of all, I want to say there's a lot of distinguished professors and alumni and people that have contributed to this college that I may not mention your name, but I recognize your contributions. But, in the early years of the college, I call it the historic founding years, names like Samuel Stanhope Smith, James Madison, Patrick Henry, John Cushing. These were the founding Mount Rushmore members of Hampden-Sydney. They laid the groundwork for what's continued today. Then, what I would call the modern years, the years that I came in, the people that you heard of and somewhat before that and after, men like Ned Crawley, John Brinkley, Cy Bunting, and General Sam Wilson. Those are the ones that came after, and I think that they also are included on that Mount Rushmore. I became even closer with a lot of my professors, I think, after graduation, which I think is also another Hampden-Sydney-esque thing that I hope never, ever stops. And, but with that being said, I think that you have to put Coach on that Mount Rushmore. We would not have had a Sam Wilson as president for 8 years and a professor for over 20 if it hadn't been for Coach. And he told me the story. He opened up the paper one day after General Sam had retired, and General Sam used to tell the story about running through Pete Clark's woods when he was 16 years old in the downtown Farmville to lie about his age to go fight World War II. And then on his retirement, he said, I didn't run through those woods, but I decided I'd walk through those woods. And he walked through those woods and put one of his distinguished service medals on the stone commemorating the men and women who had died from Farmville. And Coach read that article in the Farmville Herald, and he said, who is this guy? He didn't really know a lot about him. He had known some of General Sam's relatives because of the radio and things like that, the veterinarians, but he didn't know him real well, so he actually called him up and said, hey, I want to meet you. And that very, I don't care if you're a 3-star general or not, I want to meet you. And General Sam met with him, and he said, well, how about come in and give a lecture in one of my classes one time? And then the fact that General Sam was a Russian buff as well and spoke it fluently, they struck up that relationship, and that helped to blossom. And I think it's amazing that he brought someone of that caliber to the college, but the only reason he brought somebody of that caliber to the college is because of the caliber of a man that he was himself. And so I take my hands off to him, and I say that if Jim Sims isn't on your Mount Rushmore for Hampden-Sydney, you might need to re-examine it.
He battled deans and presidents, including General Sam, while he was president.
They didn't always get along, and they had fallouts. And a matter of fact, their relationship repaired more in the post years of General Sam's presidency and retirement. And General Sam fondly called him Seamus, and he loved him, and they had good times together at General Jerry Boykin's bonfires and at other Hampden-Sydney college events. But one of these stories is one of my favorites, and it's vintage Sims, is I think it was the summer of 2002, and they had a professional development for our professors and staff. And this is going to bring Professor Marion into this story just a smidgen. And the gentleman that was speaking was talking about inappropriate things you shouldn't say in the classroom or the workplace. And we all, I don't need to tell you, we know what that is. And so Professor Sims, he sat there, and being a typical Jim Sims guy, he listened and listened and waited, and then they opened it up for questions, and his hand goes up. And of course he said, and Coach told me, he said he could hear Marion beside him going, Jim, be prudent. Be prudent. And he puts his hand up, and the gentleman that's offering the workshop goes, yes, sir, what's your question? He goes, yeah, I coach here, I used to coach here, and I'm a professor, and I like to offer examples when I teach. Can you give me an example of something inappropriate I shouldn't say? And apparently this sparring match went on for about 3 or 4 minutes, and the guy gave up and just said, no, I'm not going to do it. And he said, fine, and I think he said he got an email from Dean Fleck saying, Jim, can we talk about the way you talk to our presenter? Which I'm pretty sure Earl got exactly one Jim thought at that meeting. One of the things that I want to because I did not want to take up a lot of time. We have a lot of great speakers today, and again, I'm humbled to be up here as one of them. But one of the things I want to say is, and this is I'm going to be coach for a minute, and I'm doing it for him, and I want to say it is, I don't know that we all realize, I think the people in this room realize what Hampden-Sydney College lost in 2024 in that man. But I don't think everybody knows. I don't think the whole community knows. And I think that's a shame. It's a crying shame. You know, DEI is a big word now, and I told him one time in one of our many, many conversations, I said, you know, you're a part of DEI. Oh, hell no, I'm not. Yeah, you are. I said, yeah, you are. I said, you're one of the most diverse people on this campus, and you have no idea. The man loved USO shows and show tunes and singing and acting. He was in plays. The man was a Marine. He was a Marine. They don't usually get any tougher or more leatherbound. You were an academic and a professor, and not just a Russian historian, you were a Russian expert. You taught Russian literature. That man had his hands in so many different things. But so many times in our culture society, we lose track of what diversity really truly means. And I think that as far as Hampden-Sydney goes, Jim Sims is one of those people that truly offered something different to every single student he ever touched. There are thousands of men like myself and the people that spoke before me, the other players, that he touched their lives and made them better. And I really do believe, and I hope, that other professors, when you talk and teach, I know I can't tell you what to say because you all know what you're doing and you have your own right to do as you please. He would do the same, but I hope you'll sing the laurels of Professor James Young Sims, because that coach was something to behold and someone that was truly special at this college. And I hope that we will somehow find our way to remember that as we continue to go forward. The last thing I wanted to do, and he always yelled at me because I didn't take Russian literature, because I told him one time when he was yelling at me for not taking his class, I said, look, I can't take you and Patrick Wilson in the same semester. I'm not going to make it. I won't graduate. But he wanted me to take Russian literature because I did enjoy Western Culture 101 and 102 with Patrick Wilson, and I would argue with Coach about what was more important, the texts or the people. And of course, Coach Sims was like, it's Alexander the Great, okay? I don't care what the Phaedrus said, you know, that was the way he was. But I tried to do a little research, and I did read some Solzhenitsyn when I had Professor Pontuso and other gentlemen that are in the room today. And so I looked up a poem, and I thought, wow, this really does capture Professor Sims. So it's very brief. I'm going to share it with you now. It's called Death Not as Chasm. Death, not as chasm, but death as a crest, a ridge onto which has ascended the road. Up in the black sky that shrouds my deathbed gleams the white sun of God. Turning about, I see in the white rays Russia, my Russia, and her polar reefs, view her with otherworldly gaze, carved out on steel by wise ancient Greeks. I see you clearly, no rancor or spite, your lows and your glory, and daily life's fight. No more shall I see you thus crucified. No more shall call resurrection to your side. When, Solzhenitsyn wrote that in 1953 while he was in prison. And he was not lamenting his life. As a matter of fact, he'd actually been diagnosed with cancer. I did a little research into it. He wasn't really lamenting his life. He was lamenting what he was seeing happening to Russia, the Soviet Union at the time. And I think sometimes in my talks with the coach, he was worried about this college. And he saw her in her lows, and he saw her in her highs. And now on high, I hope that he's looking up and remembering all those good times. The last thing, and for me, and I'm going to share this, is I have it on my phone, so you have to forgive me. Coach, I would never bring this out in class. When Coach died, I was overcome with just absolute grief, and I've done really well. I thought I was going to cry. Probably will by the end, but we'll see. And it hurt so much because I miss him, because I talked to him. Oh my gosh, I at least talked to him once a month, and I saw him at football games. And sometimes I come into Merck's place with Professor Kidd and the other group, and we just have lunch for no reason. So it really hit hard when we lost it. And this was what I posted on social media, not because I love social media, but because I really truly believe more people need to know the story of Jen Sims. But I said, the college lost a man that truly loved her and protected her for 60 plus years. I lost another family member, someone I could count on at all times. Even though he was a tough, forged Marine through and through, and he could come down on the students as hard as a sledgehammer. He always said the same words to me when we either parted ways or we hung up the phone, and I quote him now, "God bless you, son, I love you. God bless you, coach, I love you." Thank you.